That's a great way to point to it, which is like where X is happening, but it feels like a big threat and we've lost the plot. That's how we know we're in the self-esteem realm, is because that's what it feels like it's at stake. I'm going to die. And that's why we get so inflamed.
Usually when we're rocking our ego in that way, like our ego is rocking us in that way, it's fun to check yourself against love there. Like, where's love? We tend to not be feeling anywhere close to love when our ego is going crazy on us.
And that's why. I mean, that's the big, sad tragedy here, is that I think success is going to give me what I need. I think these attributes, these things the status is going to give me what I need. I think this person's validation is going to give me what I need. When it's actually love. But it's love. You're exactly right. But also love is scary as hell. Like, love can be real. If we've armored ourselves against love because we're vulnerable there, then I'm going to go for these other things instead. If I don't know how to navigate relationship, then it's a lot easier to put my head down and just go make a shit ton of money and be successful, or go collect stuff, or, just get somebody's attention and validation. But real love, like really allowing somebody into our lives and being allowed into somebody else's life, I've never learned how to do that. That's a big, big challenge.
You are listening to the new man beyond the Macho Jerk and the New Age Wimp. Your host is men's coach Tripp Lanier.
What's the common link between workaholism, greed, and love addiction? Does your sense of self-worth go up and down like a roller coaster? And is there more to life than protecting our egos? If you're like everyone else on the planet, then you've probably struggled with feeling enough. Today, Alyson and I dive under the hood to discuss Terry Real's unhealthy forms of self-esteem, so that we can all understand what kills our true confidence. Well, congratulations. What you did last week was an extension of the work you've been doing. It's an extension of the growth that you've had as a person and also as a professional. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I feel excited about doing more.
It's a new chapter for you.
Yes. Yeah. Again, cryptic conversations.
Keeping it cryptic.
You have to cut this out. I would be so annoyed if I were listening to this.
No, just keep this in. Just everybody's pissed off right now.
Anyway, I need some downtime.
The person you worked with gave us some coffee, something about death.
Death Wish coffee.
Okay. So I was a little scared to drink that this morning.
I hadn't thought about that.
I made a cup, but I only made it half. I was like,
what if Alyson's client is trying to poison us?
I only wanted to go halfway into the bardo.
This is how they actually felt about the work.
Got halfway into the bardo. I'm halfway into the bardo. I didn't do the full, because I was like, that would be bad. Like, we record something and I die on the... From Death Wish.
That's really funny.
Coffee.
Yeah, Death Wish coffee.
I didn't know what... it's with these macho coffees and macho beers and stuff, or macho hot sauces.
I think it's a great name. It's a funny name.
But I don't want to die from coffee.
Well, then don't drink coffee and don't eat fast food and all the shit that we know kills us.
But the idea is like that would be an appealing coffee. It's like, oh, this one promises death.
Well, there's also the really funny canned water called Liquid Death.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So it's like, it's in the motif of like books with titles with the name fuck in the title. It's like,
it's kind of a cliche.
It's just a trend of like coolness.
Give Mark Manson his due there, but everyone else is kind of following.
It's true. I was thinking, how do you feel about inviting people for us to be part of the conversation? Like if we invited somebody and then we had conversations with them.
You would want to try to get them to cry. That's the problem.
No. I'm thinking about, I've got 2 friends that I would want to, maybe 3 that I would want to talk about that all have to do with sort of sex and relating and that sort of stuff. I think it could be really fun.
I thought you were going to try and turn this into a beekeeping podcast.
Oh, well, that's a whole different population.
Look at you, just lit right up. You're like,
that sounds wonderful, but that's not here.
I would totally listen to that.
I would.
We could just drink tea and talk about bees.
Anyway.
Okay. Well, do you want to dive? You had a client that brought something to you.
Well, I told you that I thought maybe this could be fun for us. I'll just tell you the context because we haven't been giving anybody context on anything so far. So the context is that I had a client tell me that he and his wife were looking at Terry Real's work and, kind of checking it out because of just ways for them to grow as a couple and in relationship and such. And he was like, he always does this. He's like, well, what do you think of this person's work? And to my embarrassment, number one, I'm terrible with names, period. I knew Terry Real.
You were like, is he the butcher at
I know all these names. And then like over 30 years of being in the field of psychology, there's like essentially there's the same shit that gets reproduced and then it's like a whole different paradigm of words. There's just all these different words, but it's actually the same work. Yeah. So anyway, he was like, what do you think of this guy's work? And I was like, I didn't respond until I actually went and checked him out because I was like, I know this guy. What's his work? I can't remember his work. So anyway, all to say, that was why I'm bringing this, because when I remembered who he was, I realized, hey, this could be really good. I know that for the podcast, and also there's a lot of examples that you and I work with, and I know you work with in your client base, the work that you do and what you focus on. So I thought I'd bring it. And so we're not bringing all of his body of work, but just this one piece I wanted to bring up.
Boil it down and we're going to do his entire work.
We're just going to do the
minutes.
TikTok tweeted version of the man's career.
We're going to reduce his entire career down to 30 minutes.
Anyway,
But I think we could talk about some of the ideas that you thought were yeah, we could just cherry pick some ideas.
Yeah, and specifically...
By the way, Death Wish coffee is doing a number on my GI tract right now. I'm getting the Death Wish sweats. Okay, we're back. We never left. That was more mystery. All right, so let's go. Jesus. The stops and starts.
On your mark, your grace.
All right, so your client asked you to read up on Terry Real. You read up on Terry Real.
He asked me my opinion.
I asked you opinion.
Of what I thought of Terry Real, and I was like, fuck, I know Terry Real, but I don't know his work.
I love his cookbook. Well, let's set a little context here, because I think there's...
Terry Real speaks about unhealthy forms of self-esteem. And essentially, it's sort of how we take any aspect of the world around us and make meaning of it for our own value, for our own self-esteem.
Let's talk. I think it's important to talk about self-esteem, because that word gets thrown around a lot. And I think it's also been associated with kind of the younger cultures and their inflated sense of self-worth and self-esteem. But we all have self-esteem. We all have self-worth. There's a lot of different ways to talk about it, but I'm going to just use really broad strokes here. And there's an unhealthy version of this is when something X happens and we turn that to mean I'm either great, but most likely where we feel it is like I'm a piece of shit. Like there's an X thing that happens, and then that's a judgment against who we are. It's different than X happens and, oh, shucks, that sucks, or hey, that's cool. It somehow defines our worth.
So we're taking something from out there and we're internalizing it and we're making meaning with it.
I think we can make meaning about a lot of things, but the meaning here is whether or not I'm a good person or I'm a worthy person or not. Mm-hmm. That's the thing I want to underline.
And the distinction is something happened out there,
yes,
versus inherently within.
I walked
in
up,
versus inside out.
I walked up to a person or a girl at the coffee shop, asked her out on a date. She said, no, I'm a piece of shit, right? Versus, shucks, I really wanted to go. That's what you say.
That's exactly what they say.
No, you say shucks.
That's what you say.
Yeah, I say shucks. When I ask girls out, I say shucks because they say no.
Maybe that's why they're saying no.
But it's jumping to this conclusion. They said no.
That means this.
And that means I'm a terrible person or I'm a superior, great person.
Right.
But when in actuality, I think what we'll get to is that there's a kind of a baseline. We're always there. At least in Terry Real's world, he's saying we're kind of always there. But I don't want to jump ahead because this is your thing.
Let's back up and say, how would you define esteem, like healthy self-esteem?
How would I define it?
Yeah, because you were saying a lot of young folks are interpreting.
Terry. We haven't gotten into what Terry talks about, but I don't fully agree with what I've read. I think there's a difference between self-worth and self-esteem. Nathaniel Branden talks about this a bit. Self-worth is innate. We come into this world with worth and with value. Firemen that are rushing into a burning building to save people don't have a checklist. And they're like, well, this guy missed 2 workouts last week, so we're not saving him. He's a piece of shit. Even though our brains might tell us that. So there's an innate self-worth. And then I think self-esteem is something that we cultivate, and it's more about how we treat ourselves. But it's not rooted in the external stuff that we're going to talk about today. It's more in how we treat ourselves and more of the internal values that we have, and more of the inside-out approach versus this external, internal dynamic.
You're saying that's self-esteem.
That's healthy self-esteem.
Yeah, and I would add that I think where healthy self-esteem can be cultivated is through trying new things, trying hard things, and learning that you're okay through them. And so you can gain confidence and realize like, oh, wow, check me out. I didn't know myself here until I tried this thing. And now I'm learning more about myself, and I like what I learned about myself. So that's another way to cultivate that. And that is through taking actions, behaviors, that sort of thing. It's also edgy. A lot of people don't do it because it can create that outside-in judgment. And
we don't need to get into it, but Nathaniel Branden's got 6 different pillars of developing self-esteem, and I'll throw that out there if people want to go check it out.
Okay. So let's come back. Yeah, maybe that's a different podcast.
Maybe that's a different yeah.
So coming back to just let's just identify how Terry Real speaks about unhealthy forms of outside-based or other-based self-esteem. And he breaks it down into 3 categories. One is performance-based esteem. One is attribute-based esteem. And the third is other-based esteem. And all of this is really kind of outside in how we internalize and to create judgment and meaning.
This thing outside of
whatever's outside of us
determines whether I'm
determines our
worth.
And he uses the word worth. And performance-based esteem is really about how good really only about how good your last performance is. It's sort of how I have worth because of what I can do.
Yeah.
So in sort of a more Erickson or human development psychology, we would say that's someone who does not separate who they are from what they do. If you have this unhealthy form, you're essentially in a constant state of fragility because you're only as good as the last thing that you did.
This is really popular with guys. Men tend to gravitate towards this performance-based thing. So we have a win, we have a loss. I'm doing great, I'm on top of the world, or I'm in the gutter. But it's not just like success oriented. It's kind of anything. We tying our self-worth to numbers and metrics, like my body fat percentage or my sales numbers or my salary year over year. We can go up and down. These things can largely determine like who we are. We can attach not just our self-worth, but also our identity to stuff. But I don't think it has to be limited to kind of the button-down work culture. I've seen this kind of bullshit in yoga classes, like with people. Yeah. How much can I do?
How long can you hold the asana?
Yeah, it's like I'm gonna be in the front and I'm gonna do all these crazy poses and kind of show off to everybody. Look how much I can do, kind of a thing. There's that gives me a sense of superiority.
Yeah, how much and how well can I do it, and how that equates to if I feel okay or not.
I've asked guys. We've had conversations where they're so fixated on their numbers and their metrics. I'll say, "Do you fuck your wife this way?" You fuck your partner this way.
And then they say, yes.
Yeah, they really do. Like, like I've had people tell me, like, yeah, I make sure we do these steps and, you know, these positions, and then I make sure that she has an orgasm. And it's very much about getting to these places and checking these boxes instead of, it could be just, let's have fun.
Yeah.
So it's a different world for when we're stuck in that frame of mind.
Absolutely.
The really unhealthy version of this leads to the grind culture, workaholism, that whole thing. Like we can't relax that because otherwise it feels like we're going to die.
Yeah, and I think that for those you know, if you're sort of entertaining what we're saying here, think of everything that we're talking about on a spectrum, right? Or a scale of 1 to 10. And so the 10 is the extreme of workaholism, and you're completely just locked in as someone that is only as good as what they do, or their performance, or how much they can do, or how well they can do it. And so, and then 1 is, you know, you're scaling back all the way back to 1 in terms of like, well, if I didn't, I need to run an extra mile, but if I didn't, I'm okay, but I'm not great. I don't feel great about myself, but I still want to run that extra mile.
I might
tomorrow.
beat myself up if I don't. I think
I don't feel as good I don't just feel as good about myself because I didn't run that extra mile.
Which is different than what's best for my body. Why am I running?
Right. Exactly.
I'm running to strengthen my body.
Right. And I happen to be, this happened to need to be my body needed a recovery day, but I'm not seeing it like that. I'm seeing it as like, I feel bad about myself and because I didn't run that extra.
That's this nuance here, because we can do a lot of the right things for the wrong reasons, work really hard or our fitness or whatever. But if we throw out the idea of relaxing or doing less, what's really at stake? Is it my health going to be at stake? Are my finances really going to be at stake?
Yeah.
Or is it more like, oh, geez, it's not okay.
Yeah.
I won't be okay if I do that. When it's like, no, that's how we know we're getting into that self-esteem arena. It's okay to, I think one of the things that Terry talks about is that it's okay to enjoy wins, and we're going to feel losses. He talks about having a firewall between enjoying those wins and those losses, and somehow that having anything to do with our sense of worth. Yeah. He draws a really bright line between those two things. So even if I experience a loss, that doesn't mean it has to cross over and define who I am as a person. So if I had a loss, it doesn't mean I'm a loser, like as a person.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you're speaking to then in terms of, you know, we're going to have impact on the wins and losses then, that's human.
Yeah.
We're allowing ourselves to be impacted by life, and we're allowing our hearts to be part of our life, so to speak. Right.
Yeah.
Instead of being completely walled off and impenetrable and having no feeling or nothing impacts us. So that's important too.
Yeah.
That's actually, if we're talking about relating, that's another podcast really, but that's important to name.
And it might help us to realize, like, I don't have to take things personally. I don't have to make this about who I am as a person. And if I can do that, then I might be willing to take more risks.
Yeah.
I might be willing to try more things because XYZ doesn't have to define me as a person.
Yeah,
I might
absolutely.
still experience a loss, but there's a lot to gain there. And I don't have to limit myself because, geez, I have to essentially navigate this world where I'm protecting.
I got to avoid rejection of some kind
because it's about me as a person. There's a real strength there.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is tough. It's really tough. Another
form that Terry names in terms of sort of unhealthy self-esteem, outside-based self-esteem, is attribute-based. He calls it attribute-based. And essentially it's I have worth because of what I have. This is like everything from, do I have the car? Do I have the house? Do I have the clothes? Do I have the look? Do I have, you know, the money? Do I have, like, there's just, what do we have?
Mm-hmm. It can be physical appearance.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think of how weird people look these days as they're doing things to their
All
face.
The things. Yeah, the amount of body sculpting facilities that have cropped up with nips and tucks. And
not to get into criticisms of that, but that starts to point to, you know, I'm attached to how I look, and it feels like death if I were to age. right? You can see where there's
Yes.
if you were
Aging
to-
is big.
where this dysmorphia starts to happen.
Yes.
And we get into these weird places where we can't see things. We're so attached to how we look that it goes off the rails. And so our appearance can be something that is an attribute. My boobs, my ass, my face, for men, it's their arms or their 6-pack abs or something. It's like, we can get attached to that and kind of define ourselves by that. But it can also be our network. I'm aware of people that have, quote, friends they don't even like, but they keep those friends around because
Collecting friends.
there's a status associated with having those people in their lives, but there's no real friendships there. But they call them friends, but they're not friends. They don't really have each other's back. They're there to simply raise each other's status or support each other's status. And so losing those, quote, those friendships, but those connections or whatever can feel like death, being cast out from that group. Not just because I'm losing a friend. You're not really losing a friend. They weren't your friend to begin with, but the loss of that status is what we feel.
Yeah. I have a friend in Colorado who pretty much every time I see her, she name drops. And it has to do with the important friends that she has. She doesn't necessarily have numerous friends like what you just named, but the people that she names as friends are very important people in the world. They're very influential people in the world. And I hear that a lot from not just her. I hear it from other people. I had a coach that was like that too. It's like, I only work with the best, this person and that person and that kind of thing. And so, and then I also, a very close friend is all about intellect and how smart I am or what's the proximity. And even Terry Real kind of gets into like, if you live in Boston, it's about if your kid is going to Harvard and how smart they are, that kind of thing. So
the intellect one is big. I've met guys where they don't care about being the funniest guy or the richest guy in the room, but it is important to be the smartest guy. That's a way they have superiority over others, and they make sure that everybody gets to know that they're the smarty pants.
Smart one.
In the room. Yeah, and if that feels challenged, it can really be a punch to them. If that's like, oh gosh, if I'm dumb, then it means X. When I think of attribute-based self-esteem, I think of the scene from American Psycho where Christian Bale's character is in the boardroom or they're in some meeting room with the guys and they're comparing the business card. And everybody's kind of flaunting around these stupid business cards. And then Christian's like, well, let me see so-and-so's card. And he opens it and he's looking at it and you can hear he's melting down as he looks at this guy's card. Yeah. And it's a gut punch to his self-esteem that this guy's card is this and that. And that's an example. Like somehow this guy's card has diminished his own self-esteem and torn him down in that way. But that's how fragile this can be.
Yeah,
obviously he's a psychopath in that movie, but I'm just saying that.
Well,
but I think it's relatable.
That was a great example of an extreme. And I will say, just yesterday, my first client I spoke with, who revealed to me they moved into a new neighborhood. It's a shishi neighborhood. And their house, they moved into some person who passed away and, or went into a nursing home or whatever. So the house had not been updated or remodeled in like 50 years or something. So it's a shishi neighborhood. They move into the house and this person is going on and on about the shitball kitchen that they have that they haven't renovated. And when we got into it, because it's actually a really big thing for them, when we got into like unpacking that, the internal voice, it started with keeping up with the Benjamins of the neighborhood. But where we got was, I'll die. This is a matter of life and death.
That's this ego. That's the small self.
Yeah. But I wanted to share that because you did a great job of setting the example of the psychopath. But this is a really typically like normal, healthy, worried well type person. I would categorize them as worried well. Like there's not mental health issues going on.
Yeah.
But that's what's happening internally with a freaking couple of cabinets and a sink. Like, it's like,
that's a great way to point to it, which is like where X is happening, but it feels like a big threat and we've lost the plot. That's how we know we're in the self-esteem realm, is because that's what it feels like it's at stake. I'm going to die. This is
you said self-esteem realm. Did you mean ego realm? Or
like this is about a threat to my ego, my self-image, and it feels like it's at risk of dying, or at least real injury there, and that's why we get so inflamed.
Yeah, and it's easy to poo-poo the ego. There's good reasons we have one, and also it's a good indicator, like, to go with what you're saying, like that. Usually, when we're rocking our ego in that way, like our ego is rocking us in that way, just check. I think it may work or may not, but I think it's fun to check yourself against love there. Like, where's love? Is love in the room right now? Is love in your body? Is love anywhere around you? Because we tend, I think, to not be feeling anywhere close to love when our ego is going crazy on us.
And that's why. I mean, that's the big sad tragedy here, is that I think success is going to give me what I need. I think these attributes, these things the status is going to give me what I need. I think this person's validation is going to give me what I need. When it's actually love. But it's love. You're exactly right. But also, love is scary as hell. Like, love can be real. If we've armored ourselves against love because we're vulnerable there, then I'm going to go for these other things instead. If I don't know how to navigate relationship, then it's a lot easier to put my head down and just go make a shit ton of money and be successful, or go collect stuff, or, just get somebody's attention and validation. But real love, like really allowing somebody into our lives and being allowed into somebody else's life, I've never learned how to do that. That's a big, big challenge.
Yeah, that feels like a whole nother conversation, really. Yeah. Yeah. And so Terry would say, in the extreme form of attribute-based, as we talked about, performance-based in its extreme unhealthy form looks like workaholism. Attribute-based in its extreme form looks like greed.
Yeah.
So we just can't get enough. In Buddhism, they might call that hungry ghosts, right?
Can't get enough of what you don't really need. Yeah. Okay.
So, and then the final one is what he calls other-based self-esteem. And that's really rooted in the concept of I have worth because you think I do. How you judge me, or if you think I'm great, then I'm great. If you think I'm bad, then I'm bad. How can I impress you, or how can I behave? What can I be doing to earn your love, your valuation of me?
Wish Terry was here. Terry, let's call Terry.
Let's call him up.
Because I wonder where this fits in with nice guy syndrome and codependence, like how much they all live in the same neighborhood here, or if there's nuanced differences. I mean, there's always with nice guy syndrome, it's I'm okay if you're okay, but that seems to be a lot about not just about acceptance, but also just a conflict avoidance. It seems like it still points to the same thing, but then there's this codependence thing of.
So codependence is essentially it's a form of emotional fusion in one way or another. Like, I'm gonna manage your feelings so I feel okay, or I'm gonna make sure that you're okay so I'm okay. Just to put it differently, it's like that's a fusion, or emotional fusion, or in some circles they would call that enmeshment. And then what was the other one you?
Nice guy syndrome.
So
very similar.
So I'm gonna do all of these things. I'm gonna behave, perform in a certain way, so that I'm okay with you. You're okay with me. So to me, that's a blend of the other-based, but it's also rooted in performance-based, because nice guy syndrome often has to do with what they do for another person in order to feel the win, in order to get the win. And that is a version of boundarylessness as well.
When I think about this, when I think about my relationship with my father, and at a very young age, like, he never had to hit me. He never had to raise his voice. If he just said, look, son, I'm disappointed, I was destroyed.
Yeah, totally.
And he never weaponized it. Right. I remember he told me that one time, and I was it completely evaporated. Yeah. And he was like, son, it's okay. Like I love you, and I can be disappointed, but I couldn't hear that.
Yeah. And
and I was 37 years old. I'm kidding. I was, but it's can
I'm
still
sure
feel
if it
that.
happened at 51, if it happened, you would still have to work with your young boy.
Absolutely. I still have this. And that's why I bring it up, is because I can really feel that. Like if his somehow opinion of me, like if I feel him go away, or if he withdraws from me, or like there's something there. And
Yes. And there's something I want to speak to here, because essentially, with the other-based self-esteem, there's sort of this concept. The unhealthy version is we crash when I want to speak into what you just said.
Yeah.
We crash when love is withheld, or when love is kind of paused towards us, and.
But he never stopped loving me. But I just want to say that.
Yeah, he never stopped loving you. And this is a real nuanced conversation. We're only talking about the unhealthy forms, but in a normal, normal, whatever normal is, but healthy framework, we are actually going to have experiences where we feel or believe that love is on pause or withheld, or we at minimum feel disconnected from the contact and connection or intimacy that maybe we have with the person important to us. That happens. That happens all the time. What matters is what happens after that. And so if we're in an unhealthy kind of loop with ourselves, and that rupture happens, that disconnect happens, then typically we will then spiral. We then turn away from being in relationship with the other person to move towards closeness again, or even turn away from ourselves to check in with am I okay here? Can I love myself even if things feel unstable with my partner? We turn away from both of those things, and instead we go into a pattern of unhealthy self-esteem where we're ripping on ourselves, where we are, we're coming down on ourselves, where we don't think that we think we're a piece of shit, or we can either collapse, or we can also actually kind of get grandiose about things. We can do this with all three, where we kind of collapse our posture.
Yeah.
But anyway, point being is again, nuance, spectrum, that happens. But what do we do with it?
Yeah.
And so in the unhealthy piece, if we were to look at that 1 to 10 scale and what we're doing with it, we can move it. Terry would say we move to love addiction. This is looking at love and relationship addiction in its extreme form. I would say that it also can look like heavy, heavy self-criticism, where we can't actually be in contact, real, genuine, authentic, loving contact with ourselves or those around us, because we're busy harping on ourselves. So again, the I have worth because you think I do can look lots of different ways.
I'm thinking of a few instances where I've known people that have had done kind of really not so great stuff in their relationships. And
things that they feel bad about or ashamed of.
Definitely, yeah. And then it comes to light, and they never quite recover. They just stay in this collapsed place.
Yeah.
And it seems to invite more of that kind of punishment. They stay in a punishment phase instead of, and the conversation we have is at what point are you done being punished, right? At what point do you come back and say, yeah, I'd fucked up. But it feels like self-worth. Essentially, it's waiting for the other person to be okay, you're redeemed now.
Right.
You've been punished enough. You get to be a person again.
Yes.
Instead of claiming that and being I made a big mistake. I hurt you. I'm incredibly sorry. And I'm still a person. I still have my self-worth. That's a whole different thing. But they would stay in these places for years.
Yeah.
Of capitulating and waiting for this, essentially waiting for it to be enough punishment where they could come back and be themselves again.
And the problem, one of the problems with that, I would say, is they tend to then attract, how do we say it? But then they tend to attract the perfect puzzle piece that fits that, which is typically somebody that's also boundaryless, but then grandiose in their condemnation. So then they find somebody that reinforces that,
right.
Attacking, judging, criticizing, controlling. Then it just creates this super fun self-escalating cycle.
Yeah. Okay. So those are the three different type, at least according to Terry Real, the three different types of unhealthy self-esteem. I think it's important to name it's not whether or not you have this. We do. We can all of us do this. And like you said, it's on a spectrum. Mm-hmm. I think it's just one of those easy things. It's like, oh, I'm doing this. And then to kind of self-flagellate into another spiral of doing at least I can do that, which is sad. But
everybody does it.
Yeah. But when you identify this thing, it's like one of those, the kind of the shadow of self-improvement is you identify a thing and, oh, I'm doing that thing. And then you beat yourself up for it. So I don't want to create another one of those. So everybody deals with this. You were saying it's across different cultures. Nobody's immune from this stuff, right?
Yeah. It'll iterate. It'll kind of show up if we're truly honoring cross-cultural situations, it shows up in different ways, which I won't get into, but it's still there. It just iterates differently.
Okay. Coming back to, yes, we're gonna feel bad when we have, quote, wins or losses, meaning it's not just performance based, but I might lose status. I can be bummed out about that. I might gain status and be excited about that. Same thing with if somebody appreciating me and validating me, I can appreciate that, and somebody criticizing me, that can suck and feel bad. Mm-hmm. I think the thing we want to watch out for is letting that jump the fence into this defines who I am. This person's opinion defines me, or this status defines me, or this performance defines me. It's like being able to step back and being like, no, it doesn't. Yes. This is a bummer, but it doesn't define who I am. And that's easy to say. It's a lot harder to do, but I think it's great if we have awareness of these different aspects, because for a lot of folks, this defines who they are.
So essentially, I heard you speak about how sort of everybody in whatever form has this sort of inferior, superior thing that shows up, that it's going to show up. It does, right? So that's universal. The other thing I heard you speak of is that feelings of loss are natural. You're going to be impacted by things that hurt or humble you or have you very aware of what you need to learn or how you screwed up or whatever happened. Like, that's going to happen. That's really natural. And the how we find health through that is to not become violent, to go into a spiral where we're violent towards ourselves or another person psychologically, which is a term that Terry uses. He says that this is the root of these three unhealthy forms of self-esteem are the root of all psychological violence. Mm-hmm. So the idea in terms of coming back to health, finding center, it's to pause, stop from being willing to be fierce in setting boundaries with your own violence towards yourself or towards another person psychologically, and to be able to help yourself make the distinction that what you do is not who you are, that you are still a valuable, worthy, lovable being, even though you fucked up, or even though somebody doesn't agree with you or doesn't like the way that whatever you said suddenly triggered their stuff, and they're going to take it out on you. So to come back to yourself in these loving and gentle and compassionate ways where you're really fiercely actually setting boundaries on how much violence you're going to self-administer, and then also make the distinction of what you do is not who you are.
Good stuff.
So that's the start.
All right. Let's get some Death Wish.
I think you're done. I think you've had enough Death Wish today.
If these interviews are helping you, please leave a positive review on whatever podcast app you use so that others can discover the show more easily.